Mechanic Dan here with Runyon Surface Prep. Today we're going to be talking about propane conversion kits. There are several different kits out there on the market, but we try to stick to one of the three depending on which engine you're going to convert and the application of that the customer desires. The reason we have to convert propane and the fact manufacturers don't is because the manufacturers don't really like using propane for a couple reasons. One is the safety aspect. You really have to make sure propane doesn't leak anywhere. It's heavier than oxygen. It can fill a basement, and most of our people using it are inside a building or something. So they don't like using gasoline for the fact that the emissions is too high, but they also are questionable about the propane. Well, we have to use propane in our application. We've made it perfectly safe, and our aftermarket contenders really like the way they've done this. So our first one we're working with today is one I really like. It has a safety diaphragm and a T60 regulator. What we'll do is we'll mount the regulator and safety diaphragm up above the engine, running to a specific propane only carburetor. The manufacturer designs these carburetors, puts its own bowl on them, its own venturi sizes, and jets them just to fit whatever engine you want. Another style is what's called the pancake style regulator. Smaller pressures, but it actually uses your original carburetor that comes with the engine, and it kind of cheats by putting a little snorkel into the carburetor and sends the propane in the original venturi. So you can actually use this system with your gas, liquid gas, or your propane. All you do is shut off your propane, turn your gas on, and you're using gasoline. Turn your gasoline off, turn your propane on, and you're using propane. They all have their pros and cons. This one can be a little temperamental and hard to start at times. So oftentimes people start it on gasoline, turn the propane on, and turn their gas off, and it keeps going. It's a little easier to run that way, easier to start. Fine tuning, it's really easy to do with the pancake style, and we do use this on quite a few rental machines because it's so simple and easy. Another system is a regular T60 with lockout coil, and the manufacturer actually makes its own manifolds, puts its own size venturis in, and can regulate higher or lower speeds, more torque, depending on your application with different venturis. One of the reasons that the manufacturers do not like putting propane on is propane can be left on where gasoline can't. You can leave your gas on and the venturi is not going to suck the gas up and out and into the engine unless it's running. With propane, it's a pressurized system. The tank has up to 250 pounds on it going into the regulator and comes out the regulator at about 4 to 5 pounds. Try to keep it around 5 pounds. When you get into fuel injected systems, they get up around 20 pounds, and then the higher pressure ones are for larger engines. This right here, this lockout coil, is essential in the propane application for safety. They run this lockout coil in line with your oil sending unit. If your engine's not cranking over or running, it will not let propane go through. That way, if you turn the engine off and walk away, the propane doesn't keep coming out and filling up the engine and then filling up your area. Another way to do it, this application, they actually run a vacuum line to this safety diaphragm. If you don't have vacuum drawing through your venturi and drawing on this diaphragm, propane can't get through. So if the engine's sitting there, even though your tank is on, it can't get through to your regulator unless there's a vacuum drawn on this. The con to this is, oftentimes, if you don't have an electric start, you have to crank an awful lot to get up enough vacuum on this venturi to open up that diaphragm. By that time, your arms wore out. So what they do, they actually put a primer on the back of it. So as you go to crank, you push the primer in, it's going to let fuel go through, you crank it over, and it'll start up. Once the engine starts, you draw enough vacuum on your venturi that you can let go of the primer and it keeps running. But as soon as you kill it, it's not going to start again until you draw that vacuum on it. That's the safety issue that comes with it. Here in our next video, after this, we're going to be talking about propane tanks, the different tanks, and their applications. People often think you can just put any tank on anything and it'll work. Well, unfortunately, that runs into problems. There's vapor tanks, horizontal vapor tanks, there's liquid tanks, there's horizontal vertical tanks. You have to make sure you put the right one on the right application, or you can actually fill an engine full of liquid propane and then blow it up. Unfortunately, we've had a few rentals that have caught on fire because people don't turn the things off that they should when they're supposed to. So what we did was we went to a horizontal left-handed tank so this can never happen. It's only going to get vapor, it's not going to get liquid, which is a good reason we're going to go through all the tanks in the next video, just so you get the right application. So we're going to be converting this little GX390 right here. We're going to be pulling the tank off, pulling the carburetor off, mounting our new diaphragm, safety diaphragm, T60 regulator, the new manufacturer's carburetor just for this propane accessories, and then mounting all that on there, starting it up, and we'll show you how we mounted this and a good way to tune these 390s to a T60. It's really easy to do. You don't have a lot of play in adjusting it, but you have just enough to where you can get this thing to run really well. Two of the reasons that manufacturers don't like using propane, back in the 80s and 90s they played with it a little bit, and they did put some out there. Honda did for a little bit, Kawasaki, Kohler still does, but they try to stick to the fuel injected style, which is much more difficult to work on and diagnose. But the fuel injected seems to have less problems in the long run. One of the reasons they don't like using propane is the safety aspect. Oftentimes people will bypass the safety valves when they think something's wrong and it starts working. Well, there was a reason the safety valve shut it off, and then you can fill the room with propane. They didn't like that idea. Another thing is, technically an engine should run on gasoline. I actually read up on some of the fine print on a lot of these conversion kits, and they suggest you run your gasoline engine for at least 80 hours on regular gasoline. The reason being, it's regular gasoline that's much more lubricating than propane. Yes, propane is a petroleum product, but it has much less lubricating properties to it. Gasoline has much more lubricating. Plus, propane is 104 octane. They didn't like the idea of starting an engine and running it to break it in on 104 octane and less lubrication. It just didn't let the cylinder and rings get that good crosshatch pattern that you need for good compression to last a long time. So it was kind of running into some warranty issues. So that way they just did away with it. They didn't mess with it and let us do it. So now we convert all our own propane, and whatever application you want, just let us know if you want the easier pancake style, or if you really want the more technical, a little more expensive, we'll go to the diaphragm style. Mechanic Dan back here with RSP on our completed propane conversion for a Honda GX390. You'll see here we've mounted our regulator and safety diaphragm. You'll see here our vacuum tube going to our propane only carburetor. That vacuum tube is your safety, so the only way the propane is going to run is if this engine's running and drawing a vacuum. That's a safety in case somebody turns it off, walks away, don't turn the tank off, no problem. It's not going to bleed out all its propane. This being the issue, sometimes they can be a little harder to start that way, so what they have done is they've installed a primer on the back of this vacuum diaphragm. So you can get primer propane to start. All you do is reach around here, push in your primer button just a few seconds, let it go, pull it, and it's like the choke. It's going to start up for you. Once you do get it up and running, there's a small adjustment on your regulator. Just a small flathead screwdriver or an Allen wrench down in there. Only need to go down or up just a few turns and you'll hear it idle up. Once you get your idle as high as it'll go, leave it right there and you'll be good to go. So this was a really easy conversion. Mounted our own tank on the back. We designed that tank bracket. We make them. We design our regulator mounting brackets. Make our own because they don't really send them with the kit. because there's so many engines they go to, they'd have to make so many. Just make your own. They're not that difficult. So that's it on this conversion kit. We'll talk to you later about propane.